Now, both these SUVs, the Scorpio and the Safari, have been extremely popular since launch. Each one has their own fan following, and they've been going neck to neck over the years with a facelift here, an engine change there, and it's really been a head-on battle. But in 2012, it wasn't just a facelift that the Safari got. Tata changed the entire chassis, the suspension, refreshed it, and called it the Safari Storme. This time, when it went head-to-head with the Scorpio, it won. Well, 2 years down the line, 2014, Mahindra and Mahindra have done the same for the Scorpio. This one has an entire new chassis and suspension. But it's not only that, they've refreshed the entire look of the car, the interiors are all new, so naturally we had to put them head to head once again. When we talk of both these cars being all new, one looks at the Safari and says, new? Really? The Safari's exterior was a huge disappointment when it was shown at the 2012 Expo in terms of changes to its looks. You really have to hunt down the differences. And there's only one obvious one, and that's the rear spare wheel, which has been shifted from the tailgate to under the car. The Scorpio, on the other hand, has the same boxy shape, but a lot of new details which make it look different. It begins up front with the sporty scoop on the bonnet, the floating slatted grille, and the projector lamps with the LED brow. Around the sides, it's still pretty similar, save a few character lines, logos, and the large 17-inch wheels. Now, the rear may not be great to look at and still retains the large square tailgate, but the play with black and chrome breaks it up and makes it look quite different. Overall, the new Scorpio looks aggressive and new. On the inside, it's a whole new story for the Scorpio as well. The interiors of the Scorpio look much better than before. This flat dash opens out a lot of room inside. The chrome accents lift the interiors quite a bit. Quality has improved overall, and of course, it's very well equipped. Equipment is an area where the Scorpio absolutely pummels the Safari, and we hope this is something that Tata addressed with the facelift. The Tata SUV gets just the bare necessities, but even those somehow don't seem up to scratch. For example, the Bluetooth, USB and aux-equipped audio system is a single-DIN aftermarket unit with limited functionality. You do at least get electric folding mirrors and rear parking sensors. But the Scorpio gets all that and more. It strolls in with the custom XUV 500 source touchscreen that offers everything from satellite navigation to voice controls to a tire pressure monitor. In fact, the car's trip computer is in there too. And this is only the tip of the Scorpio's equipment list. But the Scorpio's interiors do have its sore points too. However, there's still ergonomic issues like the pedals feel a bit high, the squab of the seat feels a bit long, and honestly, the door pockets are really unusable because you can't even get your hand in once the doors are closed. So that leaves very little storage space for the front passengers. Despite the changes, the Scorpio still feels very old-school SUV on the inside, with its upright cabin and square design. The Safari, on the other hand, doesn't feel quite so boxy on the inside. The dash flows outward towards the door pads, making it more car-like, and the wood finish adds a little spark to the interior. But to get inside the Safari, you really have to haul yourself in and climb in 2 steps. Getting into the Scorpio is a little easier. Now, when you get into the Scorpio, you don't really have to clamber up as high as you do in the Safari, but you still sit relatively nice and high. And in fact, because of this flat dashboard, you sit right up close to the windscreen, so visibility all around is really good. And where the Safari feels more elephantine, this one feels more compact, nimble and manageable. The visibility in the Safari is good too, with a really high seating position. But it makes you land up feeling like you're driving a very large vehicle. When you're behind the wheel, it's really the Scorpio that feels better. Both cars use the same engines as before and both have a 2.2-litre 4-cylinder diesel. The Safari has more grunt on paper with the better figures. But out on the road, it's the Scorpio that puts better use to its numbers. Now, we always like this M-Hawk engine, and I think with this new gearbox, it feels even better than before. It's really tractable, which means, you can amble around in higher gears and you really don't have to use the gearbox much. The thing is, it's very happy to offer up power whenever you put your foot down, anywhere throughout the range. You can clamber up a hill easily, you can drive in traffic easily, or you can just cruise comfortably out on the highway. It's happy to do whatever you ask it to. The Scorpio's engine is not one of the most refined power plants and gets really noisy past the 3700 RPM mark, but it's still more silent than the Safari. The Safari's engine makes you work a lot more, so you hear it more too. The initial response is not good, and you have to push hard to get into the mid-range. Power comes in nicely only once you're past the 2200 RPM mark, so you have to work the gears to keep it above that most of the times. And despite the fact that the Safari is more powerful on paper, it's the Scorpio that's quicker to the 100 mark. It gets there in just 13.44 seconds, which is 1.5 seconds faster than the Safari. We do need to keep in mind that our test Safari was a 4x4 version, which is a full 95 kilos heavier than the 4x2 version. But the Scorpio is almost 200 kilos lighter than even the lightest Storm. Overall, where performance is concerned, it's the Scorpio that just makes driving easier. Well, you don't really have to use this gearbox too much, but when you do, it's definitely the better gearbox of the two. The shift may be taller and higher, but the throw is more positive and it feels better than that of the Safari. Now, where the Safari always trumped the Scorpio was in its ride and handling manners. The new Safari chassis borrowed from the Aria was a huge step forward and just bettered everything it did before. But the fact remains, the Scorpio's new chassis is just in a different league to its previous one, improving its dynamics drastically. On a winding section of road, the Scorpio just feels more agile, more nimble, and even the steering feels far more positive. It's quick to turn in, it's happy to change direction, and it definitely feels far more planted than it ever did before. And even really bad sections of road are not unsettling it. Stability out on a highway at high speeds is also good, and it feels more sorted than the Safari. The Safari feels unwieldy in comparison. It rolls a lot more and doesn't inspire as much confidence. The steering also feels lackluster and sloppy. When you corner, at first it offers little reaction, and then it weighs in quite suddenly, so it lands up feeling inconsistent. The Safari clearly doesn't like being cornered hard and is much more comfortable cruising along a highway at speeds. The Scorpio in comparison is really a huge step up as far as ride and handling are concerned and offers more confidence to the driver. Gone is the old Scorpio, which felt scary at high speeds and around corners. This one feels more mature and impressively composed for the tall, boxy design that it is. Low speed ride has also improved and it's now quite decent, but the downside is that on a bumpy road, the Scorpio still tosses you up. Speed breakers and sharp edges toss up occupants a fair bit, and the rear has a sharp kick which can levitate the luggage in the boot. The Safari, on the other hand, manages to score a few points where the backseat is concerned. Once you are on the inside, you feel the width of this car. It really feels wide in the backseat, and 3 passengers definitely more comfortable in the backseat of the Safari. However, the seats themselves are a little firmer than those in the Scorpio. The Scorpio's rear seat also has more leg room now and is comfortable, but the seat squab is quite long, especially for shorter people. It's still the Safari that caters to rear passengers a little better. What's also an added bonus, and you feel it especially in this sweltering 40-degree heat outside, is this rear aircon vent on top. In addition to the ones at the bottom, it really lets you get cooler in this back seat much faster. So the Safari does feel a lot more comfortable in the rear seat, and it's not only space and comfort, it's ride too. It's quite a close call on the ride quality between the Safari and the Scorpio. The Safari does have a softer setup and it irons out bad sections of road nicer, but the seat is firmer, so it lets quite a bit filter through to you, whereas the seat cushioning in the Scorpio is much nicer, so less transfers through to the passenger. Still, over sharp speed breakers and bump, it's the Scorpio that tosses you up more. Both these cars can seat 7, with both of them getting jump seats in the back. There is a bench option in the Scorpio, but the Storm will only offer the bench with the facelifted version next year. Neither of the third row is really a comfortable place to be. But the Safari passengers must be prepared to lock knees, with the legroom being quite poor at the rear. Well, both these cars come with the inherent problems of old-school SUVs, ladder-on-frame chassis, and of course the Scorpio bears the burden of its narrow track and tall boxy frame. You can't really compare them to the more modern compact SUVs. But when the battle comes down to between the Scorpio and the Safari Storme, here's what I think. The Safari Storme definitely more spacious on the inside and has that slight edge over ride quality. But that's just it. That edge has become ever so slight. Mahindra have addressed the problems that were there before in the Scorpio. The ride quality is much improved than before. Handling now better than the Safari. The interiors are nicer and improved. It's very well equipped. There's no two ways about it that the engine is definitely the better of the two. It's also cheaper. But it's not just that. The Scorpio somehow has character and soul, and if I had to pick between the two, it would definitely be the Scorpio.